The golden cage Elise Winters stood before the mirror, adjusting the diamond pendant at her throat. 3 years into her marriage to Richard Blackwood, heir to Blackwood Industries, and she still felt like an imposter in these designer gowns. The emerald silk hugged her frame, selected not by her but by her mother-in-law, Victoria, who had made it clear that a fundraiser of this magnitude required appropriate representation. "You look stunning," Richard said, appearing in the doorway. Handsome in his tailored tuxedo, he offered a perfunctory smile that never quite reached his eyes. Their marriage had begun with passion but cooled into something closer to a business arrangement, a truth neither acknowledged aloud. "Thank you," Elise replied, gathering her clutch. "Is everyone already downstairs?" Richard nodded. "Mother's been coordinating with the staff all afternoon. The Blackwood Family Foundation Gala is her crown jewel after all." What Richard didn't say, what he never said, was that his mother still resented their marriage. Elise, with her public university education and middle-class background, was considered an unfortunate detour in the Blackwood dynasty. Victoria had paraded eligible socialites before her son for years before Elise had entrapped him. As the family whispers went, the grand ballroom of the Blackwood estate sparkled with chandeliers and the jewelry of Boston's elite. Elise moved through the crowd with practiced grace, making small talk with benefactors and accepting air kisses from people who spoke about her behind manicured hands. She had learned to wear her dignity like armor. "Mrs. Blackwood, how lovely to see you taking an interest in philanthropy," said Camilla Preston, Victoria's closest friend, with a saccharine smile. "Though I wonder if you might feel more comfortable with causes closer to your background. The literacy program in the South District, perhaps." Before Elise could respond, Victoria appeared, champagne flute in hand. "Elise doesn't quite understand the nuances of high society giving, Camilla. We're still educating her." She patted Elise's arm as if she were a child. The evening proceeded like this: thinly veiled insults wrapped in politeness, exclusion disguised as concern. Elise maintained her composure until dinner, when Victoria clinked her glass for attention and began acknowledging the contributors. "And of course, special thanks to my son Richard, who continues the Blackwood tradition of excellence," Victoria announced. "Unlike some additions to our family, the Blackwood bloodline understands the responsibility of wealth." Laughter rippled through the crowd as eyes turned to Elise. Richard, rather than defending his wife, chuckled along, placing his hand over Elise's in what onlookers might mistake for affection, but she recognized as a warning to maintain composure. It was when Victoria announced an upcoming merger, information Richard had never shared with Elise, that she finally excused herself, slipping away to the garden terrace. Tears threatened, but she refused to give them the satisfaction. "They don't deserve your tears," came a quiet voice. Elise turned to find Julian Reed, the family's financial advisor, offering a handkerchief. Unlike the others, Julian had always treated her with genuine respect. "Thank you, but I'm fine," Elise managed, straightening her shoulders. Julian's gaze was steady. "You're more than fine, Mrs. Blackwood. You're remarkable. The way you handle their cruelty with such dignity, not many could." Something in his words, perhaps the simple acknowledgement of what everyone pretended not to see, broke through her reserve. "Sometimes dignity feels like the only thing I own in this house." "Perhaps," Julian said thoughtfully, "there's more that belongs to you than you realize." Little did either of them know how prophetic those words would prove to be. Whispers and shadows. The morning after the gala, Elise woke to an empty bed. Richard had left early for a critical meeting, according to his hastily scrawled note. She had grown accustomed to his absences, both physical and emotional, but something about Julian's words lingered in her mind, stirring questions she had long suppressed. Over breakfast, she opened her laptop to review the Charity Foundation's accounts, a responsibility Victoria reluctantly allowed her to maintain. As the Foundation's nominal secretary, Elise had access to these records, though the Blackwoods considered her role ceremonial at best. Scrolling through recent transactions, Elise noticed several large donations had been redirected to administrative costs, specifically to a consulting firm called Meridian Partners. The name wasn't familiar, yet over $3 million had flowed to this entity in the past 6 months. "More coffee, Mrs. Blackwood?" asked Henrietta, the housekeeper who had been with the family for decades. "Thank you, Henrietta." Elise hesitated, then asked, Have you ever heard of Meridian Partners? The company, I mean. A flicker of discomfort crossed the older woman's face. I believe it's one of Mr. Richard's newer ventures, ma'am. With Mr. Theodore Blackwood. Theodore, Richard's cousin, known for his gambling problems and failed business ventures. Victoria had always protected him, insisting family loyalty superseded his questionable character. Later that morning, Elise made her way to the Blackwood Industries headquarters downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. She rarely visited, as Victoria had made it clear that a wife's place was in supporting from behind the scenes, not inserting herself into business matters. The receptionist's surprise was evident. Mrs. Blackwood, we weren't expecting you today. I had some foundation matters to discuss with Julian Reed if he's available. In his corner office, Julian seemed equally surprised but genuinely pleased to see her. Mrs. Blackwood, this is unexpected. How can I help you? Please call me Elise, she said, settling into the chair across from him. I have some questions about the foundation accounts. She showed him the transactions, watching his expression carefully. Julian's professional demeanor slipped momentarily, revealing concern. These allocations were approved by the board, he said carefully, though I did express some reservations about the concentration of funds to a single vendor. Meridian Partners, Elise nodded. Henrietta mentioned it's connected to Theodore. Julian's gaze sharpened.
Henrietta told you that?
She's been with the family longer than Richard's been alive. I suspect she knows more than most about what happens behind closed doors. Julian seemed to make a decision, standing to close his office door. Elise, there are aspects of the Blackwood financial structure that would concern you. Meridian isn't just receiving foundation money. There are significant corporate funds being channeled there as well. Why would Richard and Victoria allow that? They're usually so protective of the company's assets. Julian hesitated. Sometimes protective measures can become complicated. Over the next hour, Julian carefully explained his concerns: strange financial movements, offshore accounts, board members being systematically excluded from key decisions, nothing explicitly illegal, but deeply troubling patterns that had accelerated in the past year. Why are you telling me this? Elise finally asked. Because you're asking the right questions, Julian replied. And because yesterday, when everyone was laughing at Victoria's jokes at your expense, you were the only person in that room with real integrity. For weeks after, Elise began paying closer attention. She noted when Richard took private calls, cataloged the names of business associates he mentioned, and quietly observed board meeting schedules. One evening, she overheard Richard and Victoria arguing in the study. The transfer has to happen now, Victoria hissed. Before the Peterson audit. And what about Elise? Richard demanded. She's been asking questions. Your wife is a convenient ornament, nothing more, Victoria dismissed. If she becomes problematic, we'll handle her like we handled her father's debts. Elise froze outside the door. Her father, James Winters, had been a respected engineering professor who passed away shortly before her marriage. The Blackwoods had never mentioned any connection to him beyond polite condolences. That night, as Richard slept, Elise searched her father's old papers. Stored in boxes the Blackwoods had relegated to a forgotten corner of their vast attic. Among faded photographs and academic journals, she found a leather portfolio containing correspondence between her father and Hamilton Blackwood, Richard's grandfather. The letters revealed a partnership, James. Winters had developed revolutionary energy efficiency, technology that became the cornerstone of Blackwood Industries' most profitable division. The final letter, dated weeks before her father's death, mentioned a formal agreement being finalized, an agreement Elise had never seen, involving patents worth billions. The next day she called Julian. I need to talk to you. Not at the office. It's about my father and Hamilton Blackwood. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in an hour, Julian replied, his voice tight with urgency. Elise, be careful. I think you're getting close to something they never intended you to find. As she hung up, Elise noticed Richard watching her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. For the first time in their marriage, she felt something beyond disappointment. She felt afraid. The breaking point. The Riverside Cafe sat nestled between old brick buildings along the harbor, far removed from Blackwood influence. Elise chose a corner table, her father's leather portfolio tucked safely in her handbag. When Julian arrived, his usual composed demeanor was replaced with visible tension. "Were you followed?" he asked without preamble. Elise blinked in surprise. "I don't think so." "Julian, what's happening?" He ordered coffee for them both before leaning forward. 3 board members received anonymous information packages yesterday. Financial records showing improper fund allocations through Meridian Partners. The board is calling for an emergency meeting tomorrow. "Did you send those packages?" Elise asked quietly. "No," Julian replied, holding her gaze. "But I suspect whoever did has access to the same information I've been gathering." Elise slid the portfolio across the table. "My father and Hamilton Blackwood were partners. These letters suggest my father created the EnviroCore technology that's been Blackwood's main profit driver for the past decade." Julian reviewed the correspondence with growing astonishment. "This changes everything, Elise. Your father wasn't just a contributor. According to these terms, he maintained controlling interest in the patents. But if that's true, why didn't I know? Why was my father struggling financially before he died?" Julian's expression darkened. "I need to check something. The timing of your father's death and Hamilton's, they were within months of each other." Their conversation was interrupted by Elise's phone vibrating repeatedly. 3 missed calls from Richard and 1 text message. "Where are you? Come home immediately. Family emergency." When Elise arrived at the mansion, she found not a family crisis but an ambush. Richard, Victoria, and Theodore waited in the study with a man she recognized as Gerald Foster, the family's longtime attorney. "Sit down, Elise," Richard commanded, his voice cold and unfamiliar. Victoria didn't bother with pretense. "You've been accessing confidential corporate information and meeting privately with our financial officer. This stops now." Elise maintained her composure. "I've been reviewing foundation accounts, which is within my role. And Julian has been helping me understand some discrepancies." "Discrepancies?" Theodore laughed harshly. "Listen to her, using big financial words." "I've been patient with your background," Richard continued as if Theodore hadn't spoken. "But your recent behavior suggests you've forgotten your place in this family." "And what place is that exactly?" Elise asked, a lifetime of suppressed indignation finally surfacing. Foster cleared his throat, sliding a document across the mahogany desk. "Mr. Blackwood has instructed me to prepare divorce proceedings. Given the circumstances, he's prepared to be generous. The lake house and a settlement of $5 million. The shock hit Elise like physical blow. Not because she still loved Richard, that illusion had long since faded, but because of the calculated cruelty. What circumstances? She managed to ask. "Infidelity," Richard stated flatly. "Your relationship with Julian Reed." Elise nearly laughed at the absurdity. "There is no relationship beyond professional respect, something I haven't received from any of you." "We have photographs of your meeting today," Victoria said triumphantly, "and record of 16 phone calls between you in the past month." "This is ridiculous," Elise stood up. "You're fabricating scandals to distract from whatever is happening at Meridian Partners." The room went silent. Theodore's face flushed crimson while Victoria's complexion turned ashen. "You've overstepped," Richard finally said. "Foster, ensure the settlement offer expires in 24 hours. After that, we'll pursue more aggressive options." That night, after Richard departed for the city apartment he thought she didn't know about, Elise received a text from an unknown number. "Check your father's safety deposit box at First National. Box 427, the key is in his class ring," heart pounding. She retrieved the ring from her jewelry box, the one possession of her father she'd insisted on keeping despite Victoria's disdain for sentimental trinkets. Just as the message indicated, the ring unscrewed to reveal a tiny key. The next morning, as Blackwood Industries erupted into chaos with news of the emergency board meeting, Elise stood in a private room at First National Bank. Box 427 contained a single sealed envelope and a USB drive. The envelope held formal documentation of a partnership agreement between James Winters and Hamilton Blackwood, stipulating that the EnviroCore patents would transfer to James's heirs upon his death, along with 51% controlling interest in the associated divisions. The USB drive contained something even more damning, recorded conversations between Victoria and Theodore discussing how they had handled the Winters problem permanently, just days before her father's fatal heart attack. Elise felt the world shift beneath her feet. Not only had the Blackwoods stolen her inheritance, they may have been responsible for her father's death. That afternoon, as Richard delivered divorce papers to her at the mansion, Elise handed him a document of her own. "What's this?" he asked dismissively. "A countersuit," she replied, her voice steady. "Not for divorce. Richard for corporate fraud, patent infringement, and criminal conspiracy." For the first time in their marriage, she watched genuine fear cross her husband's face. "The board meeting is in 1 hour," Elise continued, gathering her coat. "I believe I should attend, as the majority shareholder of Blackwood Industries' core technology division." As she walked out, she texted Julian, "It's time. Meet me at the office." The silent queen was about to speak. The revelation. The Blackwood Industries boardroom, with its panoramic views of the city skyline, had always symbolized power. 30 floors up, behind soundproof glass and mahogany doors, the city's elite made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Elise had visited only once before, during a company anniversary where she'd been positioned as decorative background in family photographs. Today, she entered as a claimant. The room fell silent as she walked in beside Julian. Richard and Victoria were already seated at the head of the table, with Theodore nervously fidgeting nearby. The board members, 8 distinguished men and women who rarely challenged the Blackwood authority, exchanged uncomfortable glances. "This is a closed meeting," Victoria announced icily. "Escort my daughter-in-law out." "Actually," Julian interjected, "Mrs. Blackwood has every right to be here." He distributed folders to each board member. "These documents confirm Elise Winters Blackwood's ownership position in this company." Richard scoffed. "This is absurd. Some old correspondence between her father and my grandfather means nothing legally." Olivia Chen, the most senior board member, adjusted her glasses as she examined the papers. "This appears to be a legally executed agreement, transferring patent rights and associated company interest to James Winters and his heirs." "This is Hamilton Blackwood's signature, presumably forged," Victoria dismissed. Elise placed her father's ring on the table. "This contains the key to safety deposit box 427 at First National Bank. Inside is the original document with notarization and witnesses. I've brought certified copies for each of you." Foster, the family attorney, appeared confused. "Mrs. Blackwood, I was never made aware of any such agreement." "Because it was deliberately concealed," Julian explained, pulling up financial records on the boardroom screen. "Following James Winters' death, significant funds were diverted through Meridian Partners to reacquire patents that rightfully belonged to his estate, to Elise." Theodore surged to his feet. "This is outrageous. You have no proof." "We have recordings," Elise cut in, her voice unwavering despite her racing heart. She nodded to Julian, who played a brief audio clip. Victoria's distinctive voice filled the room. "Hamilton's sentimentality nearly cost us everything. The Winters situation is contained, but we need to move those patents offshore immediately." The color drained from Victoria's face. Board member Martin Reynolds cleared his throat. "In light of these disturbing revelations, I move to suspend current management pending a full investigation." "You can't do that," Richard shouted, losing his composure. "This company has been in my family for generations, and apparently half of it has belonged to Elise for the past 3 years," Olivia Chen observed coolly. "The question is why this information was concealed from the board and shareholders." What followed was 4 hours of intense discussion, legal consultations, and financial assessments. Throughout it all, Elise maintained a dignified calm, answering questions clearly and directly. The evidence was irrefutable. The EnviroCore technology that generated 60% of Blackwood Industries' revenue legally belonged to Elise through her father's estate. When Victoria attempted to dismiss the claims as a vindictive wife's revenge, Elise finally addressed the room. "I didn't come here seeking retribution," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I came seeking truth. My father dedicated his life to developing sustainable energy technologies. He believed his partnership with Hamilton Blackwood would ensure these innovations helped people, while providing for his family's future. Instead, his work was stolen, his contribution erased, and his daughter manipulated into a marriage that served as convenient cover for this fraud." The boardroom fell silent as her words landed with undeniable weight. "You think you can just walk in here and take what generations of Blackwoods built?" Richard demanded, desperation edging his voice.
No, Elise replied.
I'm not like you. I don't take what doesn't belong to me. She slid a proposal across the table. This outlines a restructuring that acknowledges my ownership while keeping the company intact. All current employees maintain their positions and the Blackwood name remains. But the corporate governance and financial structures will change to ensure transparency and ethical operations. Foster, who had been reviewing the document, looked up in surprise. This is remarkably reasonable. You could demand much more. Destroying the company would hurt innocent employees and beneficiaries of our foundation work, Elise explained. That's not my intention. You expect us to simply hand over control? Victoria asked incredulously. Olivia Chen interjected. Victoria, considering the alternative is likely criminal charges and a catastrophic public scandal, Mrs. Blackwood's proposal seems generous. After heated debate, the board voted 7-1 to accept Elise's restructuring plan, with only Victoria dissenting. Richard, recognizing defeat, abstained. As the meeting concluded, Richard approached Elise. You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Using our marriage to infiltrate the company? Elise met his gaze steadily. I loved you once, Richard. I knew nothing about my father's connection to your family until yesterday. Ask yourself who was really using whom in our marriage. Outside the boardroom, Julian waited. The board will issue a statement tomorrow announcing the restructuring. We should prepare for media inquiries. Elise nodded, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline faded. Julian, those recordings. How did you get them? I didn't, he admitted. They were sent anonymously to my secure email last night. But I have a theory. He hesitated before continuing. Henrietta has worked for the Blackwoods for 40 years. She was Hamilton's personal assistant before becoming the housekeeper. I think she knew the truth all along. Elise considered this. She was always kind to me, even when no one else was. As they stepped into the elevator, Julian gently touched her arm. What you did in there, offering a compromise instead of destruction, that took extraordinary strength. Not strength, Elise replied softly. Perspective. Some things are worth more than revenge. The elevator doors closed on the empire that would never be the same again. The Silent Queen speaks. 6 months passed like a transformation spell in a fairy tale, turning Elise from the dismissed daughter-in-law into one of the most respected business leaders in the city. Blackwood Industries, rebranded as Winters Blackwood Sustainable Technologies, thrived under her leadership approach that balanced profit with purpose. The divorce had been finalized without fanfare. Richard relocated to the London office, a mutual decision that gave him distance while maintaining his role in international operations. Victoria had retired to the family's estate in Vermont. Her influence diminished, but her dignity preserved by Elise's insistence that the public narrative focus on restructuring rather than scandal. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been Hamilton Blackwood's office, as Elise reviewed quarterly projections with her executive team. The space had been transformed, the dark wood and hunting trophies replaced with clean lines and living plants. A framed photograph of her father now held the place of honor on the wall. The EnviroCore expansion into developing markets is exceeding expectations, reported Naomi Patel, the brilliant engineer Elise had promoted to Chief Innovation Officer. Your father's original designs were decades ahead of their time. He would have loved seeing this, Elise replied, feeling a bittersweet pride. The investigation into her father's death had proved inconclusive. The recordings had implicated Victoria and Theodore in financial misconduct, but couldn't definitively connect them to his heart attack. Theodore had accepted a plea deal for his role in the financial fraud, while the board had decided against pursuing charges against Victoria, given her age and health. Elise had made peace with this outcome. Justice had many forms, and restoring her father's legacy while transforming the company culture felt like the most meaningful vindication. As the meeting concluded, Olivia Chen remained behind. The senior board member had become Elise's most stalwart ally during the transition. The Forbes profile is out, Olivia mentioned, sliding a tablet across the desk. They're calling you the Silent Queen of Clean Energy. Elise smiled at the headline, hardly silent these days. You've earned the respect of everyone in this industry, Olivia observed. Not by demanding it, but by demonstrating what true leadership looks like. After Olivia departed, Julian arrived for their scheduled lunch. Their professional relationship had deepened over the months, evolving into something neither rushed to define. He carried a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "What's this?" Elise asked as they settled in the private dining room adjacent to her office. "Something Henrietta asked me to give you," Julian replied. "She's retiring next month." Inside the package was a leather-bound journal with Hamilton Blackwood's monogram. Elise opened it carefully to find entries spanning decades, including numerous references to her father, not just as a business partner, but as a trusted friend. The final entry, dated days before Hamilton's death, read, "James has agreed to formalize our partnership. The EnviroCore patents will secure his daughter's future, as it should be. Victoria and Richard will fight this, but the papers are signed. My only regret is that I won't see young Elise take her rightful place in the company we built together." Tears blurred Elise's vision. He knew, all this time Hamilton intended for me to have a place here. "Henrietta protected his papers after he died," Julian explained. "She says Victoria destroyed most of them, but she managed to hide this one." "I should thank her," Elise said softly. "She told me she's already received her thanks by watching you these past months," Julian replied. Some justice comes in unexpected ways. That evening, Elise hosted a reception celebrating the launch of the Winters Engineering Scholarship, a program providing full university funding to promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The city's business elite mingled in the botanical garden venue, a striking contrast to the ostentatious galas Victoria had favored. Journalists approached Elise throughout the evening, asking about her remarkable rise in the company's transformation. To one who inquired about her feelings toward the Blackwood family now, she simply replied, "Every family has its complexities. I'm focused on building a future that honors the true partnership between James Winters and Hamilton Blackwood." Later, as the crowd thinned, Elise found herself alone with Julian on the garden terrace, reminiscent of their first meaningful conversation the night of the Gala humiliation. "A year ago I stood on a different terrace trying not to cry after being mocked by the people who should have valued me most," she reflected. "You were the only one who saw me then." "I've always seen you, Elise," Julian said quietly. "Not as a Blackwood or even as the controller of EnviroCore, just as yourself. The most remarkable woman I've ever known." Under the garden lights, with the soft murmur of departing guests behind them, Julian took her hand. "I've been careful about crossing professional lines, especially given everything you've been through. But I need to ask—" Elise smiled, finally allowing herself to acknowledge what had been growing between them. "Yes," she said simply. "I haven't asked the question yet," Julian pointed out, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Then ask it," Elise replied, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Would you consider having dinner with me? Not as the CEO and her financial officer, but as Elise and Julian?" She laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that seemed to brighten the night. "I thought you'd never ask." The following morning, the business pages featured a photograph of Elise at the scholarship launch, captioned, "From Outsider to Visionary, How Elise Winters Transformed Winters Blackwood." The article praised her leadership style, which balanced accountability with compassion, and noted how she had retained 97% of the company's employees, while improving both profitability and sustainability metrics. What the article couldn't capture was Elise's personal journey, from a woman trapped in a golden cage to someone who had found her voice, her purpose, and perhaps even love on her own terms. In her father's old office chair, now placed in the corner of her modern workspace, Elise read the morning headlines with quiet satisfaction. The phone rang, Henrietta calling from the mansion. "They're saying wonderful things about you in the papers, Mrs. Winters," the older woman said, deliberately using Elise's maiden name, as she had begun doing since the truth emerged. "Thank you, Henrietta, and thank you for preserving Hamilton's journal. It means more than I can express." "He would have been proud," Henrietta said simply, "as would your father." After the call, Elise turned to the window overlooking the city. The Blackwood name still adorned the building, a nod to history and reconciliation rather than defeat. But it was now paired equally with Winters, just as her father and Hamilton had intended all along. The silent queen had found her voice not through vengeance or domination, but through grace, integrity, and the courage to rewrite the ending to her own story. In doing so, she had transformed not just a company, but the very meaning of power itself.